Hello, my name's Amy, and I am here to start to teach you how to foundation paper piece. So perhaps you've been thinking about foundation paper piece quilting and you didn't know where to start. So this video is going to give you a breakdown of what you need in order to get started. Item number one, you need to have a pattern. Now, I recommend that you start with an economy block like this. This is called a square and a square and a square, okay? This is a 6.5 inch size. So it's a finished block of 6 inches with the seam allowance going all the way around the edge. This is actually linked in my bio. There's a link to a free version of this that you can download and print. When you do print them, just know that you need to verify that they are printed to scale. So at the bottom of the pattern, when you print this, there's going to be a little square that will say, please verify that this is 1 inch by 1 inch square. So you are going to want to take a ruler to that and actually measure it. If it is not 1 inch square, you need to adjust your printing until you get it to match exactly that 1 inch square. That's how we know we're printing to scale. Once you have those, you can go ahead and print them in bulk. You can use regular printer paper, which is what I'm using here. I find that it works really well, but you can also use just newsprint. You can buy a ream of newsprint online or at any of a local office supply store and use that for your foundation paper piecing. You can also use something called foundation papers. They're specifically made for foundation paper piecing. They just tend to be a little bit pricier. So I find that newsprint or regular old printer paper is a little bit more economical. The other things you're going to need: fabric. Now, this is going to depend on whatever pattern you're following, how much the size is, etc. I have everything I need to make this stack of papers right here. This is my center square for all of them, my inner triangles, and my outer triangles. So I get them all cut and ready to go. If you're unfamiliar with what sizes to cut them as you go for the first block until you figure that out. If you're doing this particular block, I'm going to go over the specific instructions for this block and what you need to cut in the next video. Once you have that and some fabric, you're going to need a few more things. One is a glue stick. You can use a straight old Elmer's, any kind of water-soluble glue stick like this. These are easy to find almost everywhere. You can also use one of the sewing type glue pens with refill cartridges. I particularly like Sewline. I have those as well. I use them a lot for English paper piecing, but for this purpose, because we're working with a much bigger piece of fabric, I find that the regular glue sticks work just fine. And they will come out when you do wash your quilt. You also are going to need some kind of cutting mat. I prefer a rotating one. This happens to be the Sew Tights magnetic cutting mat, but any cutting mat will do, preferably one you can bring really close to your machine. As you see, I've kind of set up, some people call it in their kitchen, right? A working triangle in their kitchen. It's ensuring that you can access the sink, the stove, and the refrigerator efficiently. The same thing is kind of true with foundation paper piecing. You're going to need to work with the papers and your ruler, right, to cut off excess fabric. And then you're going to need to stitch and you're going to need to press. So as you can see here, I set up my own little station where I have my rotary cutting mat, my rotary cutter, my sewing machine, and a little pressing station, okay? So any cutting mat will do. A smaller one is preferable, but whatever you can kind of make work in your little space. The rotating nature of it just helps because there will be times that you'll be trimming all the edges of this piece, and so you can just keep turning it rather than having to pick up the fabric and move it. You'll need a rotary cutter. This is my favorite. I recommend a 45 millimeter. It doesn't necessarily have to be this brand. This brand just happens to be my favorite. You may say, but Amy, why? This isn't our Martelli Notions ergonomic rotary cutter. I like it because one finger goes up here, your thumb goes in this little plastic hole, and you cut like this, okay? It's a very natural position for me. I find I get less hand fatigue and pain in my wrist and my arm. So I like that. The other reason I really like it is because I'm a klutz and I cannot easily cut myself with this ruler, okay? So this finger's up here, this is all plastic. This thumb's over here, this is all plastic, and the blade is all the way down here. Right now my blade is locked, and the way you unlock it is you just start to cut and it will come off. And then to lock it again, I take my finger and I lock it. So I really like this because it's very difficult for me to cut myself. Any of the rotary cutters are fine. Just know that you know how to use it. Make sure you have a sharp-ish blade. I know that we don't always change them that often, but it needs to be relatively sharp. And I prefer the 45 millimeter size. So if you have 28 or an 18 or a 60, it will still work, but I think that the 45 is a good size for these particular projects. So I have that ready to go. Then the next thing is kind of a unique thing that we typically only use for foundation paper piecing, and this is an add a quarter ruler. It comes in an add a quarter, as in a quarter of an inch, or add an eighth, as in an eighth of an inch, and that's what this little lip is on this side. So when you are doing foundation paper piecing, it involves a series of folding on one line, flipping our ruler over, trimming off an excess so that it leaves that 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then attaching the next piece, right? So this ruler is going to automatically measure out that 1/4 inch seam allowance for you each time by this little lip that's on here. So that's why I love this. Once again, you can get them at a quarter or at eighth. At a quarter works fine for these type of economy blocks. When you're doing fussy little skinny points that have lots of pieces of fabric coming together, sometimes you do need that at an eighth just to prevent the bulk from building up in a certain seam. Okay, so one of these, very helpful. You may say, but what else do you need? An iron, okay? So you're gonna be doing some pressing here. I like my little mini M3 Pro Oliso iron. I love it because it's small, it gets hot, it's heavy. So when I am pressing, I can lay a block down, I can put my iron on here, I can let go, and it can stay there for a second. It is heavy enough that it will stay. It'll make this super, super flat and ready to go. This is a completed block. So I just have a wool pressing mat here and my iron. Now, some people ask, Amy, you don't have anything under that wool pressing mat. I don't, and it's because I'm not using steam at all. So if I was using steam, I would worry about what would happen to this table underneath, but with no steam, it's just heat. The wool mat is protecting what's underneath it well enough, okay? So the last thing you really need is your sewing machine. And I have a Bernina 790 Pro. Her name is Betty. I love her dearly. She's been with me for almost 2 years. The only setting that I change when I'm using her is you can use whatever foot you normally use for piecing any kind of quilt like you normally would. I am using the same needle, but I do reduce my stitch length. So my default stitch length on this machine is 2.5, and I click on that and I bring it down to between 1.8 and 1.9. And you may say, but why? And the reason why we do this is because it will then mean that there will be more holes per inch. More stitches per inch equals more holes in the paper, okay? Each time the needle goes through, it's gonna make a hole in the paper. At the end of this project, because we're stitching on the paper, the more holes means the easier it will be to rip that paper off at the end of this project. So I like to reduce it down. I find that 1.8, 1.9 is kind of the magic number for regular printer paper to make those papers peel off nice and cleanly, so you're not having to use tweezers to go in there and grab little pieces that didn't quite rip off. That's all you need. Sometimes I use a little bit of spray starch at the end of these projects. Once I've pulled the papers, I will spray starch them, especially if I'm not going to be assembling the whole quilt right away. These happen to be swap blocks, so I'm going to be making them in bulk and sending most of them off to be swapped with other quilters across the country. And so when I do that, I do like to starch them only because they're more likely to hold their shape and stay nice and flat during all of this shipping process. So I will starch them at the end. That's all you need to get started. Now, if you want to start foundation paper piecing with me, I will be doing a video next that will be showing you how to access this particular template so that you could use the same template I'm using, which is once again is a 6-inch economy block for a square and a square and a square. It finishes to 6 inches, but that's 6.5 with the seam allowances. I will give all the measurements for how to measure your fabric, how to cut the fabric, how to prepare it and get it ready. And then how we finish these blocks, how we trim them up at the end, how we stitch them, where we stitch them, right? All of those things I will go through step by step using this block. So if you have questions about this particular block, you can go over to my link in bio and you'll see it on there. Feel free to download that or go directly to that website where those are found. Know that there's foundation paper piecing in all shapes and sizes, letters, animals, flowers, not just these economy type blocks. So the possibilities are endless. I really love foundation paper piecing because I feel like it's almost like a paint with numbers. So your job is to fill in each number, because there are numbers on these pattern pieces, with a fabric. So you get to pick the color, the texture of that fabric, and then you go to the next one. So it gives you an outline and you're just filling in the outline. A lot of people will say, I can make this block without using the papers. You could, there's no denying that. But for a swap, it's really key to use papers because then we can all ensure that our pieces are going to be exactly the same. But the other reason why we use foundation papers is because you will get really exact points. So if you're trying to get your pointy points here and pointy points here and everything to be really square and really perfect, this will allow you to get those really perfect points and really perfect squares that are all going to come out exactly the same because you're using the same paper piece. So here are two different of the block that I'm working on. And if this sounds like something you're interested in learning, then go ahead and join me for some future videos by subscribing to my channel, and hopefully these videos will get you on your way to a foundation paper piecing journey. Thanks for joining me.